there are some goodbyes that happen in anger, and then there are the ones that happen in silence. The kind where someone walks away, not because they stopped loving you, but because loving you started hurting in ways they could no longer explain. I know you spent nights wondering why I left, why I became distant, why the person who once promised to stay forever suddenly disappeared without giving you the truth you deserved. But my love, the truth is Abby never left because I stopped caring. I left because every time I looked into your eyes, I realized I was becoming someone broken, someone afraid, someone who no longer knew how to hold your heart without shaking. And maybe that was my biggest mistake. I thought leaving quietly would protect you from my storms. I thought carrying the pain alone was better than letting you watch me fall apart, but silence creates wounds words could have healed. So tonight, for the first time, Abby want to tell you the reason. I walked away, not to ask you to come back, not to make you feel guilty, but because some love stories deserve honesty. Even when they end in tears. My love, there's something I should have told you a long time ago, something that sat heavily inside my chest every single night after I left. A truth I kept hiding behind silence because I didn't know how to explain it without sounding weak, without sounding selfish. Without sounding like a man who gave up on the only person who ever made his heart feel safe. You spent so much time blaming yourself. I know you did. You probably replayed every conversation in your mind, searching for the exact moment things started changing between us. Maybe you thought you weren't enough for me anymore. Maybe you believed I found someone else. Maybe part of you still wonders why the person who once looked at you like you were the answer to every lonely prayer suddenly became distant. Cold, unreachable. But my love, it was never because I stopped loving you. That's the cruelest part of all this. I left while still loving you with every broken piece inside me, and people don't talk enough about how painful that is. They think heartbreak only happens when love disappears. But sometimes the deepest heartbreak comes when love is still there. Alive. Breathing. Begging to stay. While the person carrying it feels like they're drowning under its weight. You loved me in the purest way possible. You loved me gently, potterly, honestly. You loved me in a way I had never experienced before. And maybe that's what terrified me the most. Because when someone loves you deeply, they begin seeing parts of you that even you try to avoid. They notice the sadness hiding behind your smile. They hear the exhaustion in your voice. Even when you say you're okay, they feel your silence becoming heavier before you even understand what's happening inside yourself. And you noticed everything. Even the things I tried so hard to hide. You noticed how sometimes I'd stare into nothing for minutes without speaking. You noticed how I'd suddenly pull away, emotionally, after moments where we felt closest. You noticed how difficult it was for me to believe I deserved happiness. I remember the way you used to look at me when I went quiet. Like your heart was trying to reach mine without words, and every single time, you asked me, "What's wrong?" I wanted to tell you the truth. I wanted to say, I'm tired, not physically, spiritually. I was tired of fighting battles inside my head that I didn't even understand anymore. There were nights when you fell asleep beside me while I stayed awake staring at the ceiling, wondering why someone as beautiful as you chose to love someone as damaged as me. I know that sounds dramatic. Maybe even unfair, but that's genuinely how I felt. You saw a man worth loving. I saw a man barely holding himself together, and after a while, pretending became exhausting. I started feeling guilty every time you smiled at me. Guilty every time you spoke about our future with excitement in your eyes. Guilty every time you told me I made your life better, because deep down, I was scared I would eventually become the reason your heart broke. You loved me with certainty, but I lived with fear that one day my darkness would become too heavy for you. Fear that my overthinking would poison something beautiful. Fear that no matter how much you loved me, my mind would always convince me I was impossible to keep. And I know now that I should talk to you instead of shutting down. I should trusted your love enough to let you see my pain completely. But my whole life, I learned how to survive by staying silent. Some people cry for help, others disappear quietly. I was the second kind. The more you loved me, the more pressure I felt to become better, stronger, happier, healed. And when I couldn't do that fast enough, I started hating myself for it. I remember one night specifically. You were talking about the future so innocently. You mentioned a little house, soft music in the kitchen, late-night conversations. Maybe even children someday. Your eyes were glowing while you spoke, and instead of feeling excited, I felt panic. Not because I didn't want those things with you. I did. God, I did, but because I couldn't imagine someone like me surviving long enough emotionally to deserve a peaceful life like that. You saw forever when you looked at us. I saw the possibility of disappointing you. That's when something inside me started collapsing quietly. I became distant after that, didn't I? You felt it. The text became shorter, the smiles became forced. The warmth in my voice slowly disappeared. But it wasn't because my love faded. It was because I was fighting myself every single day. You know what hurts the most? Watching someone love you while you secretly feel unworthy of it. That kind of pain changes a person. I began isolating myself emotionally because I thought it would protect you later. I convinced myself that if I slowly pulled away now, maybe your heart wouldn't shatter as badly. When I finally left completely, I thought distance would make things easier. I was wrong, because every cold reply hurt you. Every moment of silence confused you. Every emotional wall I built made you feel unwanted.
And still,
You stayed. That's the part I'll never forget. You stayed through my mood changes, through my emotional shutdowns, through my confusion, through the moments I became difficult to love. You stayed even when I gave you reasons not to, and instead of appreciating your patience properly, I became more afraid. I kept asking myself questions late at night. What if she wakes up one day and realizes she deserves better? What if I ruin her softness? What if my pain eventually becomes her pain too? I carried those thoughts alone, because I didn't want to burden you with them. But hiding pain doesn't make it disappear. It only makes it grow in silence until it starts controlling everything. I remember the last few weeks before I left. You tried so hard to save us. You spoke softer to me, loved me harder, held me longer. You could feel me slipping away, couldn't you? The saddest thing is, part of me was begging to be stopped while the other part kept walking toward the exit emotionally. I wish I could explain how exhausting it is to fight your own mind every day while pretending everything is okay. I wish I could explain how lonely it feels to sit beside the person you love most and still feel emotionally lost. I started believing you deserved someone lighter, someone easier to love. Someone who didn't carry storms inside him all the time, someone who wouldn't wake up at 3 a.m. questioning his worth. Someone who wouldn't overthink every argument, someone who wouldn't feel guilty for being loved. And, maybe that sounds stupid to people who have never hated themselves quietly. But self-doubt can destroy even the most beautiful relationships if it's left untreated long enough. I didn't leave because you failed me, I left because I failed myself. There's a difference. You gave me love, real love, the kind that checks if someone got home safely, the kind that notices sadness hidden behind fake smiles, the kind that stays during difficult seasons instead of running away. But I didn't know how to receive that kind of love without fearing it, because when someone finally loves you correctly, after years of pain, trauma, disappointment, or emotional loneliness, it almost feels unreal. You keep waiting for it to disappear. You keep expecting abandonment. You keep preparing yourself for heartbreak even while being held gently. That's what I was doing the entire time, preparing for pain that hadn't happened yet, and in the process, I created the very heartbreak I was afraid of. Sometimes I wonder if you hate me now. Honestly, I wouldn't blame you. From your perspective, it probably looked like I gave up on us without explanation. Like I stopped trying, like I abandoned something beautiful for no reason at all. But every step I took away from you hurt me too. Every ignored message, every goodbye I never explained, every night I spent missing you while pretending I was fine. You know, after I left, life became quieter, but not peaceful. There's a difference between silence and peace. Silence is empty, peace heals, and I wasn't healing. I carried you in everything. Songs reminded me of you, certain streets reminded me of you. Late night skies reminded me of you. Even the smallest things hurt. I'd hear someone laugh the way you used to laugh and suddenly my chest would feel heavy again. I'd walk past places we once visited and remember how safe your hand felt in mine. People think leaving someone means forgetting them. That's not true. sometimes leaving someone means remembering them every single day while pretending you made the right decision. And maybe I'm selfish for admitting this. But there were nights I almost came back, nights I stared at old conversation, nights I typed long messages before deleting them, nights I wanted to hear your voice so badly it physically hurt. But I stayed away, because I kept telling myself the same thing: she deserves better than this version of me. Maybe I underestimated your strength. Maybe I underestimated your love, but at the time, leaving felt like the only way to stop hurting you. I know now that silence can wound people more deeply than honesty ever could. If I had simply told you, I'm struggling emotionally, maybe things would have been different. If I had admitted how broken I felt inside instead of pretending to be strong all the time, maybe we could have fought together instead of separately. But I grew up believing pain should be hidden. That vulnerability makes you weak, that men should suffer quietly, so I mastered the art of smiling while emotionally collapsing, and you loved me through it, until I became too afraid to let you see how bad things truly were. You once asked me, why do you push people away when they love you? I laughed it off back then, but the truth is, when someone spends enough years being disappointed, abandoned, betrayed, or emotionally hurt, love starts feeling dangerous instead of comforting. Not because love itself is dangerous, but because losing it becomes terrifying, and losing you terrified me, so instead of risking the pain of watching you leave someday, I left first. That's the part I'm most ashamed of. You were willing to stay through my darkness, but I didn't trust that enough to believe it completely. I kept expecting your love to expire eventually. I kept waiting for the moment you'd realize I wasn't worth all the effort, but you never did. I created that ending alone inside my head. Do you know how many times I replayed our final conversations afterward? Too many. I remember the sadness in your voice, the confusion, the way you tried to understand me even while your own heart was breaking, and I gave you almost nothing in return. No explanation, no honesty, just distance. You deserved better than that. You deserved truth. The truth is, I was losing myself long before I lost you. I had become emotionally exhausted from fighting thoughts I didn't know how to silence. I looked normal on the outside, but internally I felt like I was sinking slowly, and instead of reaching for your hand, I isolated myself. That's what pain does then sometimes. It convinces people they have to survive alone. Even now, I still remember little things about you that probably mean nothing to anyone else. The way your voice softened when you were tired, the way you looked at me during quiet moments, the way your hand automatically reached for mine in crowded places. You loved with such sincerity, and maybe that's why losing you still hurts the way it does, because people like you don't come into someone's life often. You made ordinary moments feel meaningful. Sitting in silence with you felt peaceful. Late-night conversations with you felt healing. Even simple things like grocery shopping or listening to music together felt beautiful because you were there. You gave warmth to my life during a season where I felt emotionally cold inside myself, and instead of fully appreciating it, I let fear convince me I wasn't built to keep something that beautiful. I know this speech probably sounds like regret. Maybe it is, but more than regret, it's honesty. The honesty I should given you before I disappeared emotionally. Because the truth was never that I stopped loving you. The truth was that I loved you while feeling emotionally lost at the same time, and those two things existing together nearly destroyed me. I wish people understood that sometimes the person who leaves is hurting too, not always, but sometimes. Sometimes they leave because they feel broken beyond repair. Sometimes they leave because they believe their pain will eventually hurt the person they love. Sometimes they leave because they don't know how to ask for help without feeling ashamed. That was me, a man silently drowning while being loved deeply. I remember looking at your photos after we ended, and wondering if you were sleeping okay, wondering if you were eating properly, wondering if someone was holding you when life became difficult. I still cared. I never stopped, even when I forced myself not to reach out. I cared, and maybe love doesn't disappear as quickly as people pretend it does. Maybe real love lingers quietly inside people long after relationships end. Maybe that's why some names still hurt years later. Maybe that's why certain memories never fully fade. You became part of my emotional history in a way no one else ever had. And despite everything, despite the heartbreak, despite the silence, despite the mistakes, loving you was still one of the most beautiful experiences of my life, because you taught me what genuine love feels like. Not perfect love, not movie love, real love, the kind that chooses patience during difficult moments, the kind that stays soft even after arguments, the kind that notices pain without needing it explained perfectly. You loved me as a human being, not as an ideal version of who I pretended to be, and maybe that's exactly why I became scared, because being truly seen by someone changes you. You saw parts of me I spent years hiding from the world. And instead of rejecting those parts, you tried to hold them gently, but I didn't know how to believe I deserved that kind of tenderness for all long, so I sabotaged the very thing I needed most. There are nights even now, where I wonder what would have happened if I had stayed honest instead of silent. If I had told you how heavy life felt sometimes, if I had trusted your love enough to stop pretending I was okay, maybe we would survived, maybe we wouldn't have. But at least you would known the truth. At least you wouldn't have spent so much time questioning your worth because of my inability to communicate my pain properly. You were never hard to love, never. The problem was that I didn't know how to love myself while being loved by you, and until someone learns that, even the healthiest love can start feeling overwhelming. I wish I could go back and sit beside the version of you that cried because of me. I wish I could hold your face gently and tell you not to blame yourself for my silence. You didn't fail me. You loved me beautifully. I was just emotionally drowning in ways I didn't know how to explain yet. And drowning people don't always scream for help. Sometimes they just slowly disappear beneath the surface, while everyone around them wonders what happened. That's what happened to me. I disappeared emotionally long before I physically walked away. And by the time I realized how much damage my silence caused, we were already standing too far apart from each other to find our way back easily. But if there's one thing I need you to believe after hearing all this, it's that my leaving was never proof that you weren't enough. You were more than enough. You were kind, Baton, gentle, loving. You gave your heart honestly, and if I couldn't hold it properly back then, it wasn't because your love lacked value. It was because I was still fighting wars inside myself I hadn't learned how to survive yet. If I'm being honest with you tonight, there's something I've carried inside me for a very long time. Something heavier than guilt, heavier than regret. A truth I kept locked away, because I was afraid that if I ever said it out loud, it would finally make everything real. I didn't leave because I stopped loving you. I left quietly because I didn't want you to see me falling apart, and I know that sounds selfish now. Maybe even cruel. Because from your side, it probably felt like abandonment. It probably felt like I slowly became a stranger without giving you any explanation at all. One day I was holding your hand like I never wanted to let go. And the next, I was emotionally miles away from you, but what you never saw, what I worked so hard to hide, was how lost I had become inside myself. You loved a version of me that smiled through pain, a version that kept saying, "I'm okay," even when nothing inside me felt okay anymore, a version that tried to stay strong because he didn't want the person he loved to worry. But strength can become exhausting when it's fake. And every day, pretending became harder. There were moments when we were together, sitting side by side, and all I wanted to do was tell you the truth. I wanted to look into your eyes and say, "I'm not doing well, I'm trying, but I'm breaking inside." But every time the words reached my throat, I swallowed them back down, because I was terrified that if you saw how damaged I really was, you'd stop looking at me the way you did. You looked at me with so much love, so much belief, like I was someone safe, someone dependable, someone strong enough to protect your heart, and I didn't want to ruin that image. I didn't want you to see the sleepless nights, the anxiety I hid behind silence, the emotional exhaustion I carried everywhere, the moments where I questioned my own worth so deeply that even your love couldn't quiet those thoughts completely. So, instead of opening up to you, I slowly started disappearing emotionally. You noticed it before I admitted it to myself. You noticed how distant I became, how my replies lost warmth, how my eyes looked tired, even on good days, how I started drifting away during conversations. And still, you stayed gentle with me. That's what hurts the most when I think about us. you kept loving me. While I was slowly collapsing inside myself. I remember nights where you rested your head against my chest and spoke about our future, so innocently. You talked about little dreams like they were already waiting for us somewhere ahead. A quiet home. Peaceful mornings. Growing old together, and every time you spoke about forever. My heart broke a little more, because I wanted those things with you. I truly did, but deep down, I was afraid I wouldn't survive my own darkness long enough to become the man you deserved. That fear consumed me slowly. You know what people don't talk about enough, how exhausting it is to fight battles inside your own mind while trying to love someone properly. I woke up every day, trying to be enough for you, while secretly feeling empty inside myself. And after a while, I started believing that no matter how much you loved me, I would eventually disappoint you. I convinced myself it was only a matter of time before my sadness infected your happiness too. And maybe that sounds dramatic, but when someone has been carrying emotional pain for years, they begin seeing themselves as a burden, instead of a person worthy of being loved gently. That's exactly what happened to me. I started feeling guilty for needing your reassurance, guilty for my silence, guilty for my mood changes, guilty for the parts of me that still felt broken despite your love. You were giving me your whole heart, and all I could think about was how unfair it felt for someone as pure as you to love someone as emotionally exhausted as me. So I started pulling away. Not because I wanted freedom, not because I wanted someone else, but because I thought losing me slowly would hurt you less than watching me completely fall apart in front of you. I thought distance would protect you. I know now how wrong I was, because silence doesn't protect people, it confuses them, it wounds them, it leaves them alone with questions they were never supposed to carry, and you carried so many questions after I left. I know you did. You probably wondered why your love wasn't enough to make me stay, why I stopped communicating, why I became emotionally unreachable, but my love. Your love was never the problem. The problem was that I didn't know how to survive myself. There were days when even getting through normal conversations felt exhausting because my mind would not stop racing. Where I smiled in front of everyone while feeling completely disconnected internally, and whenever you asked me what was wrong, I saw concern in your eyes. Real concern. The kind that comes from genuine love, but instead of letting you help me, I hid deeper, because I had spent most of my life learning how to suffer quietly. Some people grow up believing vulnerability brings people closer, others grow up believing vulnerability makes them difficult to love. I was the second kind. So, every time life became heavy emotionally, my instinct was to isolate myself, instead of reaching for comfort, even from you. Especially from you. Because losing your image of me scared me more than losing myself. That's the tragedy of people who struggle silently. They become so focused on protecting others from their pain that they forget. Love was never supposed to be carried alone. You would have stayed beside me through the darkness, if I had simply trusted you enough to let you see it completely, but I didn't. I kept trying to fight everything alone until I emotionally exhausted myself, and eventually, I broke, quietly, slowly, invisibly. I remember the last weeks before I left so clearly. You became softer with me, more patient, more careful with your words. You could feel me slipping away emotionally even though I kept denying it, and instead of asking for help, I kept pretending. Pretending I was just tired, pretending things would get better soon, pretending the emptiness inside me wasn't growing heavier every day, but at night when I was alone with my thoughts, I felt myself unraveling. I questioned everything, my worth, my future, my ability to keep someone happy, my ability to deserve a love as genuine as yours, and eventually, I started believing you deserved someone emotionally healthier. Someone who wouldn't disappear into silence every time life became difficult, someone who could accept your love without doubting it constantly. Someone better. That thought destroyed me slowly because I loved you deeply. Walking away from you felt like tearing out a part of my own soul, but staying while emotionally collapsing felt even more terrifying. I didn't want you to watch me become a shell of myself. I didn't want your beautiful heart carrying the weight of my battles too. So, I made the worst decision possible. I left without fully explaining why. And I know that kind of silence leaves scars. I know there were nights where you probably cried trying to understand what changed, nights where you blamed yourself for things that had nothing to do with you. If I could erase one thing from your heart, it would be that guilt, because you were never difficult to love. Not once. You were warmth during my coldest season, you were peace during my chaos. You were one of the few people who loved me without trying to change me, and maybe that's exactly why I became afraid. Because when someone finally loves you correctly after years of pain, trauma, disappointment, or loneliness, it feels too beautiful to trust completely. You keep waiting for something to go wrong. That's what I was doing the entire time, waiting for heartbreak, before it even arrived, and in the process, I became the heartbreak myself. I hate that. I hate knowing the person who wanted to protect your heart became the reason it hurt. But the truth is, I wasn't emotionally strong enough back then to carry both my inner battles and the responsibility of loving someone as deeply as you deserved. I wish I had understood that asking for help isn't weakness. I wish I had understood that love doesn't expect perfection. I wish I had trusted your heart enough to stop hiding mine from you. Because maybe we could survived it together, maybe. If I had sat beside you one night and finally admitted, I'm struggling mentally and emotionally, things would have unfolded differently. Maybe you would have held my hand through it. Maybe we would have healed slowly together. Maybe I wouldn't have felt so alone. But instead, I convinced myself isolation was strength. And isolation destroys people quietly. After I left, everyone probably assumed I moved on easily, but they didn't see the nights I stared at old photos missing you. They didn't see how many times I almost reached out. They didn't see how empty life felt without your voice in it. You became part of my daily existence, in ways I never fully appreciated, until you were gone. Even small things reminded me of you. Songs, coffee shops, late-night drives, rain against windows. You existed in the little details of my life so deeply, that forgetting you never really happened. And maybe that's what real love does. Maybe it leaves fingerprints on ordinary moments forever. I still remember the way you looked at me when I was quiet. Not with annoyance, not with judgment, but with concern, like your heart wanted to understand mine even when I couldn't explain myself properly. That kind of love is rare. And I was too emotionally damaged at the time to receive it properly. That's the painful truth. I wasn't rejecting you, I was rejecting myself. You kept trying to reach me while I kept sinking deeper into my own thoughts. And the more you loved me, the guiltier I felt for being unable to fully heal. I thought love should automatically fix people. I know now that it doesn't work that way. Love can support healing, love can inspire healing, but love alone cannot heal wounds someone refuses to face honestly within themselves. And I was running from my own wounds for a very long time. You once asked me why I always carried sadness in my eyes even during happy moments. I never answered properly. But the truth is, some people become so used to emotional pain that happiness starts feeling temporary to them. They struggle to trust peaceful moments because part of them keeps waiting for everything to fall apart. That's how I lived internally. Even during our best moments, fear existed quietly inside me. Fear of losing you, fear of disappointing you, fear that one day you'd realize loving me was exhausting, so instead of trusting our love completely, I prepared myself emotionally for disaster all the time. And eventually, that mindset destroyed us. I wish I had known how deeply silence can hurt someone who genuinely loves you. Because from your perspective, it probably looked like I stopped caring. But I cared every second. I cared when I ignored messages because I didn't. God knows it how to explain my emotions. I cared when I distanced myself, emotionally, even while missing you terribly. I cared when I walked away, pretending it was the right thing to do. That's the cruel thing about emotional struggles. They can make people hurt the ones they love most, while genuinely believing they're protecting them. And I really believed leaving would save you from me. I thought if you stayed long enough, eventually you'd have to witness every broken part of me I was ashamed of. The anxiety, the overthinking, the emotional exhaustion. The sadness I kept buried under fake calmness. I didn't want your beautiful heart carrying all that weight, so instead of letting you stand beside me willingly, I made the decision alone, and that was unfair to you, because love is supposed to involve honesty, partnership, trust, not silent suffering. not disappearing emotionally without explanation. You deserved transparency from me. You deserved truth. You deserved the chance to decide for yourself whether my darkness was something you were willing to face beside me. But I made that choice for both of us because I thought pushing you away was kindness. Now I understand it was fear. Pure fear, disguised as sacrifice. And if I could relive those days, I wouldn't leave you wondering why you suddenly felt unloved by the person who once adored you. Openly, I would sit beside you honestly. I would tell you how exhausted I felt internally. I would admit how badly I was struggling mentally and emotionally instead of pretending to be okay, because maybe vulnerability would save us more than silence ever could. But back then, I didn't know how to let someone witness my breakdown without feeling ashamed of it, so I disappeared quietly instead. Not because I stopped loving you, but because I loved you while losing myself at the same time.